don't think the future is straightforward. I don't think we can envision the possibilities that exist in the future. Everything is possible. Even the things we currently think are impossible are not necessarily always going to be impossible. So I think I'll hold on to that as well when I'm feeling particularly dejected about politics in the world and the way things are going and the way technology is going. And I just think human beings are incredibly creative, and life is incredibly creative, and the world is incredibly creative and self-healing. And there are other ways forward. So that keeps me going. And living on the land is very nurturing. Every day I am reminded of life. I go to see my goats and sheep and take them for a walk, and everything around me is just bursting with life. And it's so uplifting. It's so powerful. I do not know the way forward. I'm very uncertain. Throughout my life I've been uncertain about the next step. But I feel that's quite important, because being uncertain enables you to experiment a little with possibilities. And that experimentation can sometimes open possibilities you didn't think were possible. So there's a philosopher I have in mind here who I've drawn on a lot in my own work, Jacques Derrida. And he had an expression which I really love. It's called to experiment with the possibility of the impossible. The experience and experiment with the possibility of the impossible. And I love that, because the impossible isn't something that's not possible. It's something that's not yet possible, that we haven't foreseen as a possibility. So everything that I do here, everything I do in my life, is about trying to open up a new space of possibility. Even when I think everything is impossible and lost, I want to open a new space of possibility. And I suppose moving to Portugal was that. I didn't know which way to go. There wasn't a way forward. I had to do something radically different that I didn't know how it would turn out. I had to open a new space of possibility for myself. And that's why I ended up here, I think. I had had a long relationship with living in the bush in South Africa in my younger years. And even to the extent of being a zoologist, working as a zoologist in the field, in nature reserves in Southern Africa. And I kind of wanted to get back to that after a long period of working in an office. I was an educational philosopher, working in an institution in the UK, and while it was an absolutely incredible job, I just needed to make a change and get back into a more peaceful, quiet, supporting environment. Well, I grew up really loving animals and always wanting to work around animals, thinking I would be a vet, because that's what people do. They grow up liking animals and their parents tell them, well, you're going to be a vet. So I went to university to be a vet, but quickly realized that wasn't going to happen. So I ended up being a zoologist. And I felt part of the bush. I felt very African. So much so that I never wanted to leave Africa at all. There was no reason to come to Europe. I lived in Africa for the first 40 years of my life without any intention to ever leave Africa. I got very involved in the political issues in South Africa as well. I was living in South Africa during the Apartheid era and working at a university, and quickly becoming very politicized around educational inequities, which is basically how I ended up in Britain. But I loved South Africa. I loved being in the bush. I loved working closely with animals. I ended up as an educational philosopher to try to sort out some of the educational inequities in South Africa, because I felt just living in the bush and being close to animals was too selfish. I needed to be more socially involved and doing something to help the system. So 20 years of a career in South Africa ended, and the next 20 years was a career in Britain as an educational philosopher. And I'm hoping the next 20 years will be here on this farm, which might see me out.
So it's a bit like coming full circle then.
It feels like it, yeah. It certainly feels like it. I'd always done art as a child and as a young adult, and right through my career I've always done art. And I started thinking that I need to engage more with art, which had always been sidelined. It wasn't seen as a real career. I started returning to it and engaging with artistic practice again every day. And it's been 2 years since I've done that. Almost 2 years to the day, actually, since I started engaging seriously with art. And it's come such a long way. So here I am engaging with, I think, is an incredibly intellectual pursuit, which is art, while being out in the bush. And I find it so close. I find making art is so close to my practice of academic writing. The way I used to write philosophical papers was to sit down and think about things and write something on the paper and edit it and not know exactly what, I don't have the idea formed in my head. It slowly exposes itself through many layers, many iterations, many drafts, and the idea then emerges and the paper completes itself. That is exactly the situation that happens now with my artistic practice. So I'm doing abstract art, which I'd never done before, taught myself how to, engaged online with some abstract art courses and learned a whole lot of interesting things about abstract expressionism and artistic practice, which I'd never known, even though I'd practiced a lot. So it opened up a different way of being. It engages me completely. When I'm doing art, I'm completely engaged and absorbed in what I'm doing, exactly the same way I was when I was a zoologist in the field doing my work, exactly the same way as it was when I was doing philosophy. Can now enter that space of artistic practice, and it's precisely the same deep intellectual engagement. So I love that. And it forms a balance between being out here in this amazing space, but it's an intellectual space which I think I've always required. The artwork that I do draws very heavily on my entire life. So I use a lot of organic textures and colors and natural sort of materials in the art because I'm very close to the land. But I'm also very close to intellectual ideas and philosophy and colonization and power struggles. So I also bring that tension into the work. I've got a huge stack of academic journals which I tear up and stick onto the canvases. A lot of the words are really meaningful to me. Sometimes I want to censor the words, sometimes I want to expose them a bit more, but in any case what happens is that they get painted over, they get scratched through, they get rearranged in ways I could never do with an academic paper. So part of the process is to bring together the biological, our biologicalness of being with our intellectualness and our politicalness of being. And I try to bring all those aspects together. It's how I feel when I'm painting. Or it's not just painting, because I put all sorts of materials on the canvas. I use paint as well, but I use paper and glue and soil and charcoal. I bring all of these elements together because they have to be brought together, because this is our life, because we are biological, we are political. We colonize, no matter who we are with. Even here, I'm colonizing this land in various ways. I'm deciding for this land what will happen to it. I'm making decisions here. I mean, they are constrained decisions because the land also insists on doing certain things its own way, and so do my animals. But I'm influencing things in a big way. And that's a form of colonization which I need to get to grips with. The trees have really humbled me here. The age of them. I mean, some of our chestnut trees, they're no longer living, but the remains of the chestnut trees must be 500 to 800 or older years old. They've been here for such a long time, and what really is humbling is the fact that a forest of such grandeur was here there are chestnut stumps like that, these 500 to 1,000-year-old stumps, at 10-meter intervals on this land. Unfortunately, we've lost a lot of them because of the fire we had. It's burnt them down to the ground. They're not there anymore. Never has a fire been able to erase the trace of this forest until 2022. There was trace of the magnificence of this forest. Now that magnificence has almost disappeared. Nobody will know what a magnificent forest was here. The height and stature of those trees is mind-blowing. They were like caves inside these trees. So even having the remains on my land of those trees was something just so, I don't know, I can't explain the feeling that creates.
How did the wildfires shape or reshape your perception?
For a long time we were in shock. I thought we might even leave the land. And then we started to see, the landscape was black, and I thought a lot of trees had died. And then spring happened, and the fire happened at the end of summer, and we had to go through a black winter. And then green came through the black, and it was just phenomenal how things returned, the resilience of the land. I know it's not as resilient as we would like it to be, that we can damage it so terribly that, we can damage it terribly. But it will come back. Maybe not if humans are on it, but it's experimental, it's alive, it will grow, things will grow eventually. And that gives you a lot of, I suppose, courage, to see the courage of the land. I realize I can stay here. We've probably been through the worst fire that's been seen here, maybe hundreds of years. And we're alive, and the land is alive. Pine forests were killed. Thousands of hectares of pine forest were killed. The fire came through here with such great intensity. And our forest's still standing because it's a natural forest. It could go through even the worst fire it's ever seen and still come out the other side living. It's amazing to me. And it also gives me a lot of hope that humans might start to see that the land is worth more than just what they can extract from it. It's a being, just like humans are beings. And it doesn't have to have a function or be good for humans. It just is here, and it must be respected for itself. In many ways, I feel that we're in a catastrophe, the way the world is now. I feel sometimes I'm hiding here. I'm hiding from the catastrophe. One can't really hide. So I try to write about it in my art, express it in my art. My art, a lot of people find it's very dark. I'm expressing the catastrophe, but I also want to bring in the fact that it's biological. Our catastrophe is biological. It's made by biological beings. It's not separate from anything. And it's harsh, and maybe at some point I'll start putting a bit of green in my work. Other than just the browns and the greys and the blacks.
And in the face of all of that, what gives you a sense of hope?
The fact that recovery is possible from anything. The knowledge, not just I don't even know what a fact is anymore, but the knowledge and the belief that things can be different, no matter what. There's other possibilities. That always gives me hope. It always gives me a renewed energy to continue to go in a different direction, to explore something else, to experiment. with the possibility of the impossible.